At Thanksgiving, Richard and I spent a few days with my daughter Emily and her family up in New York City. And I was so grateful to at least be with one of my granddaughters. We had planned to be with everybody, and we had to scale that down. So we got to be with little Maya, who is now 6 months old and doing very well. Here's how she's looking these days. The whole family, including Popster in the lower left-hand corner there. And that's her with her daddy and my daughter, and of course me. And it was just such a lovely, beautiful, beautiful, wonderful time together. And one of the challenges in Maya's little life right now is going back to sleep when she wakes up in the middle of the night or during a nap. So while I was there, one afternoon, I offered to put her down for her nap, which is, I love to do that. And I was going through my usual routine, patting and rocking. Any of you parents and grandparents out there, you know what I'm talking about. And just kind of waiting for her to settle down. Finally, she relaxed on my shoulder. Her weight doubled. And, and I knew that she was asleep. So I gently laid her down in her crib, and I just stood by for a few moments just to make sure she was really out. And she was. She was lying like this in the crib. But every few minutes, she would startle. She would just jerk like that, and it would scare her, and it would wake her up. And she would cry out. And she would go back to sleep. A few minutes later, another little jerk, would cry out, go back to sleep. It happened like 3 or 4 times, and finally she drifted off peacefully. Well, I thought later that this was sort of the perfect metaphor for what we've experienced this year, is the way the various avenues of my life intersect. There's a perfect metaphor for what we've experienced this year, because isn't it true that we've been startled by one thing after another, that we've been shocked or surprised, thrown off kilter from the pandemic to the lockdown to the George Floyd murder to the racial justice reckoning to the political divisions to the election. I don't need to list it all, you know it all. But it's had the effect of putting us so much on edge, kind of in that constant state of being braced. We may not have audibly cried out, but the hurt is still there. And so we've essentially been living in startle mode, we could call it. We've been living in our heads rather than in our hearts. So now, of course, as the holiday season approaches, the question is, how do we make that, what do they call it, the great 6-inch journey, or however many inches from our heads into our hearts? How do we come back to a place of peace within us? That's what we want most of the holidays. We want to feel at peace. Well, the easiest way to do that is by setting a clear intention to have that kind of holiday season, by carefully considering what we most want and need right now, and then going about very mindfully the process of creating it. Usually as the holiday season comes around, we all sort of fall back into our traditional patterns and the things we do, right? This is what we do at the holidays, even here at church. These are the things we do. These are the activities. These are the sorts of gatherings. We kind of get into, holiday mode to make all those things happen, our shopping and planning and all of that. But this year's different, very different. The whole year has been different. And every holiday has felt very different. Easter was different than it's ever been before. 4th of July was different. Halloween, Thanksgiving. And Christmas is going to feel different. It already does feel different as well. There's some things we just won't be able to do that we usually do this time of year. Gatherings we won't have, events that we won't be enjoying. We are living in an extraordinary time, and we have had to make extraordinary adjustments in how we work and play and learn and interact and celebrate and even connect with each other. I'm sure you felt at times, as I have, that it's felt like one loss after another. And yet in the midst of all of that, there are still gifts. There are still gifts that have come forth. And if we're in the right mindset, especially during the holiday season, we can find those gifts. Well, one of my favorite Bible stories beautifully illustrates the options available for how we show up this holiday season. And you're familiar with it, I'm sure. It's the story of Martha and Mary. And we find it in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Now, as they went on their way, he, Jesus, entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, Lord, picture it. Do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. But Jesus answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted. You are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Now, when I read this story, a lot of times you feel a little defensive of Martha, don't you? I mean, she was obviously knocking herself out. You know, couldn't Jesus have been just a little bit more appreciative? But instead, he praised Mary, who was pretty much just sitting there. But Jesus says, Mary has chosen the better part. Her way of being is the better part, not running around in all directions, trying to make sure everything is perfect, not trying to impress people, but just being fully present and aware. And then he says only one thing is needed. Presumably that one thing is to pay attention and tune in to the presence of God. Tune in to the presence of God. You see, Martha was primarily living in her head, running all around. We've all done this, right? We got stuff to do, people to see, things to make happen, all that. She was in her head, but Mary was in her heart. Just being. Just being. You know, a lot of times when we read this story, I think we tend to identify with one character or the other. We say to ourselves, well, I'm a lot like Martha. I'm in my head. I run around all the time. Or we say, no, I'm really more of a Mary person. I'm a lot like Mary. I'm kind of an introvert, kind of quiet, that sort of thing. The reality is that all of us are like both of them. They both represent different aspects of who we are. And this is where we find the true meaning and the significance of this story. You see, Martha represents the ego, the human side of us. This is the part of us that is concerned about other people's, what they think about us and how we're perceived. We want to be liked, we want to be admired, we want to be successful. Mary represents our spiritual self, right? The deep essence of who we are. It is the Mary in us that longs to know God. It is the Mary in us that wants to be lifted in consciousness, that wants to be awakened, if you will. And Jesus, of course, represents Christ consciousness. We would say in unity, the highest expression of God in humankind. And what we know is that this same consciousness that he epitomized and exemplified and taught, that same consciousness is seated in us, just waiting to be brought into full expression. We call it our divine potential. And so the story tells us that the way to achieving this Christ consciousness, this full realization of the truth of who we are, is not through the ego, not by running around and trying to impress people or whatever it is, whatever story we're telling ourselves. The way to Christ consciousness is through the Spirit within us, through our true nature, spiritual beings having a human experience. And what we find is that as we strip away these outer layers, sort of the Martha layers of us, the preoccupation, the worries, the fretting, the whatever drama we've created in our lives, we strip away all the must-dos and all of that and just come down, simplify. We come to the Mary in us, we come to the Christ consciousness in us, which is the pure presence of the divine. One of my favorite quotes is from the great 13th century Christian mystic Meister Eckhart. He said this: God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. Strip away all the misguided thinking. Strip away all the stories we tell ourselves. Come home to God through a process of subtraction. And I almost feel like that could be our theme for this year, could it not? We could say 2020, the year of subtraction. Because 2020, there have been so many things that we've had to give up. There's so many types of ways of being together, events, gatherings, and all that. But the same is true as you strip away those outer activities. You come home to what is truly important. And hasn't it been so for you this year? That yes, it's been painful to not be able to be together. It's sad not seeing you all here today. But at the same time as those other things are stripped away, what is most important has just come shining through in the most brilliant, radiant way. Isn't this a year when you have so deeply appreciated the love that we share, whether we're in the same location or not? Isn't it a time when friendship has meant everything? When a person reaching out to you or you reaching out to someone else, a kind word, a phone call, someone remembering you, hasn't it meant everything? Hasn't it meant everything that we've learned how important our spiritual path is? Oh my gosh, what an incredible year for that, realizing we're in charge of what we're creating in our own minds. Through this whole situation, these are the circumstances. Now, what are we going to do with that? What are we going to make that mean? We're in charge of our own well-being and our own happiness. And certainly this has been a year when the health and well-being of ourselves and our friends and family has been absolutely paramount and still is. You see, we strip away the outer, we come home to that beautiful, incredibly lovely light of God. So through subtraction, we've gained clarity, and the same can be true during the holiday season. You know, there are times in our lives when it's appropriate to be like Martha. It truly is. I mean, somebody's got to get her done, right? Somebody's got to clean the house and make the meal and wrap the gift. You know, we need a little Martha every once in a while. But there are other times when it's right and appropriate to be like Mary. And this is one of those times. We need to have time to heal from all we've been through. We need time to be still and know, to rediscover that inner sanctuary of love and peace within us. We need to refill our spiritual well, if you will, because when we refill it, it radiates out to bless others. So how do we do that? Well, here are 3 surefire ways to get back into our hearts and to stoke up our sort of spiritual connection. And the 3 ways are, I forgot the first one. Oh, to go apart, to be grateful, and to give. So let me talk about going apart, first of all. Going apart, when we say go apart a while, it simply means finding a way, either physically or in your own mind, to just spend time in sort of the sacred, right? You might wish to go somewhere where it's very quiet and you can be alone, or perhaps if you're even in a crowd, you can create that kind of space in your own consciousness. We had a congregant here, member for a long time, Cindy Root. She used to say, each morning she has coffee with God. Oh, what a beautiful idea, right? She just sits down there at the breakfast table and has her little time of communion. Whether you call it prayer or meditation or contemplation or just time in the silence, doesn't matter what you call it. But it's really making that important and foundational to your day, and it's more important now than ever. You know, a lot of times when people hear the word meditation, they get a little fretful about that. They think, oh, that just sounds so formal, or that seems so advanced, or I can't meditate. I'm not a good meditator. I've heard that so many times. I've even thought that sometimes. But the reality is there is no one right way to meditate. The important thing is that you have some quiet time for yourself. And whatever helps you get to that place of relaxation and peace is good. You know, maybe you have a mantra, maybe you notice your breath, maybe you tune in to one of these wonderful apps that are out there now that help you with guided meditations. There's no shame in that. I've heard about Calm and one called Headspace, and the one I really like is called Breathe, even though they spell it with 2 E's, which to me is like nails on a chalkboard. But it's still a wonderful, wonderful app. When we set aside time like this, oh my gosh, it can be a total game changer. It can change everything. So the other day I was feeling very out of sorts and overwhelmed, had a long to-do list, and just feeling anxious. And then I also was feeling pretty sad. Sometimes I feel sad. I'm not with my children and my grandchildren. I was missing them. I was not content. I was not centered. And I certainly was not spiritual. And so I decided to go apart for a while. For a good long while, as it happened. I did my heart math, focused on my breathing in and out through the heart. And then I listened to one of the guided meditations on breathe. It's absolutely beautiful. And then I just sat for long, luxurious minutes in the silence. And then something quite wonderful happened. From deep within me came a voice of knowing. It was the voice of a presence that had been observing all of my emotional ups and downs and feelings I was having. And this beautiful, clear voice said, "That's not you. All these emotions, all this stuff you're wrapped up in, that isn't you. That isn't you. You are this. You are this light. You are this peace. You are this love, this presence." Changed everything. Everything just dissolved away. I was so filled up with God. It was so clear. It changed my entire day, of course, and it changed, or I should say, it restored my understanding and awareness of who I truly am. Oh, yes, right, that's the I am that I am. When we rediscover this about ourselves, not only does it shift our emotions and our consciousness, but it just sets us up for these additional ways of refilling our spiritual well so that we can truly activate those in a meaningful way. And so the next one is to be grateful. I honestly do not feel it is possible to be angry, upset, sad, or anything else when we're grateful. You know, no matter how difficult life may be, no matter what comes our way, there is always something to be grateful for. Always. And when we enter into that attitude of gratitude, as Richard sings, everything begins to look different. And so try this practice if you have not already, or even if you have. Write down 10 things that you're grateful for. And then notice how you feel. It's a beautiful thing. And then this third way of coming back into our hearts, which is really what we mean when we say the heart of Christmas, is coming back into our own hearts, is giving. You know, giving is just such an amazing thing because as you give, in the very act of giving, you're receiving. Whether you're giving a gift or a compliment or appreciation or love, whatever it may be, as you give it, you are getting filled up. It's not a reduction for you, it's an addition. Isn't it so? I love this. That truly the more we give, the more we have. It's a beautiful, beautiful spiritual principle. Look for ways to give. You know, we have these wonderful Christmas care packages that we've created for everyone. And when we first came up with this idea of doing it, was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Like, this is 300 Christmas gift bags, and we're in a pandemic. It's not like people are flooding in to pick these up. So we talked it over, and we decided, no, we can do this. We are going to deliver these to people. If they can't make it in, we're going to deliver them. And it seemed a little daunting there at the start, but here's what happened. As I and Richard and Alicia and Paul and others who've stepped up to volunteers, we started getting out there and delivering those bags to you guys. We felt wonderful. We felt so blessed. Here, I'm leaving you this special little care package just for you. It's got everything you need for the upcoming holiday services, but more than anything, it is so filled with love. And what happened is people would go out on one run, they'd come back and say, I think I'd like to deliver some more. So we're down from 300 now to about 30. What a blessing. It's all love. It's all good. You know, this holiday season, we're all looking for ways, the right ways, how to give to those we love. We're thinking about how can we make this a meaningful and satisfying holiday season. And we're thinking about all of these aspects of what's happening now and how to not feel, too terribly disappointed over the things that we can't do that we usually do. But remember, Jesus said only one thing is needed. Pay attention. Tune in to the presence of God. I truly appreciate what a special time this is. As difficult as it may be, it's also a very tender time. And so my fondest wish for each of you is as you go forward into this holiday season, to not only be turning your attention to the presence of God, but to feel that presence within you and to allow your higher self to care for you and nurture you. Treat yourself just as gently as you would a little baby. Pour on the love. Sometimes when Maya is fussing in her crib, sprawled out there with her arms, but having a little trouble going to sleep, I just lay my hand on her chest and just rock her just the tiniest little bit. Give her that sense of security as if to say, you're okay. You can relax. You're loved. And all is well. And so I say this to each of you today, and I invite your higher self to remind you every single day, you're okay. You can relax. You are loved. And all is well. Let's prepare now for our meditation. I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes. Breathe in deeply. Release into the presence, the one power that we call God. Breathing in and breathing out. Feeling peace wash over you from the top of your head, moving right on down to the tips of your toes. And breathe. I invite you to take into your own heart this beautiful invocation that was the favorite of Unity co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. I am now in the presence of pure being and immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. I acknowledge thy presence and thy power, O blessed Spirit. In thy divine wisdom, now erase my mortal limitations. And from thy pure substance of love, bring into manifestation my world according to thy perfect law. Immersed in the presence of pure being. I invite you to give over whatever burdens you might be carrying, whatever random thoughts or distractions moving through your mind. Set them aside and tune in to this pure presence of being, this pure love in the silence. As we give ourselves over to this beautiful divine light within us, we find that all the crooked places are made straight, that our burdens are lifted, our way is made clear, and peace becomes our way of being. Thank you, God, for this truth. Thank you for this ever-present love. And so it is. So we let it be. Amen.